Hey, what's going on, guys? Hope everyone had a great weekend. Hope everyone had a good week. It was a rather good week for the P&L and for the alert section. Obviously, really nice to have coming off of the AMD idea that didn't work out so well. I know there's a couple other names that I really took stabs at that didn't work either, namely Baba. I know AMD was the big one. There was one other one that I can't think of. It was Palantir. I took a couple starters on Palantir. Just a couple names that haven't really worked. And it's just nature of the beast right now, guys. Tape is very, very dry. You guys know it's pretty much been 10 names that have been moving the S&P. IWM started to catch a little bit of a rotation, but we're still not seeing the breadth that we would normally see. If we were to see the broader market really participate with a liquidity injection. So if we were to see rate cuts similar to 2021, 2022, it's more of a just, pick a target, throw a dart at it, and it works, right? And those are the markets that really, really catch fire, and you can make money on seemingly anything. Right now, it's not the case. It's very selective. A couple names are running. The overall indices are slowly grinding higher. We've been talking about the incremental higher highs since we broke the all-time highs on SPY and QQQ. No real major breakout. It's just been a slow grind up, and that has been a result of the summer, right? The summer's always that way. It takes a little bit of a vol event to really reinvigorate VIX, and we're still waiting on that. We have headlines that could be the case, but overall, it's just a very, very difficult market, and you have to be very selective and very patient. This week, finally able to catch a little bit of a break here on UNH. This was a big idea. And you guys, know, obviously I was talking about this as a Wyckoff accumulation. Very, very simple setup. You guys know I pretty much just trade accumulations, distributions, typical mean reversions, parabolic tops, parabolic bottoms. It's pretty much all I trade, right? And then I also trade progression gap, structural moves, right? So if we get a progression gap, we have structure that's built within some kind of pullback within a progression gap, or for short or long, I take those as well. But yeah, you guys kind of know how I trade by now, hopefully. But really picture perfect here, where we had a sell climax, automatic reaction, secondary test. We kind of popped a little bit higher and then created, for the most part, this range here from sell climax, secondary test to the spring, all within this here, right? So we had climax. And the reason I knew that this was an accumulation, I'll just minimize this really quickly, put it over here, but right, we talked about this from the weekly perspective, where we had almost a picture perfect distribution, right? It played out more of a weekly / monthly time frame. But on the weekly, you guys can see distribution occurred here. We had a nice little sell-off with an LPS that happened on the weekly, right, which retested the bottom of the distribution range and then continued for a lower low. But then it gave us almost a monthly LPSY, right, where the distribution was here, it broke down, and we got like a monthly LPSY up near these highs here at like 612, and then the real breakdown began for a much larger lower low, right? And a lot of our volume actually didn't occur here, which was very interesting, and this is why I figured it was an accumulation. And you guys can see a lot of the sell-off that occurred on UNH really happened on low volume, which is indicative of a distribution, right? A lot of the higher volume should be up here, or some of the structural foundation of the distribution should be here. As it breaks down, it usually does so on lower volume, and it'll suck in new buyers by each new gap down day or major breakdown day. Will have higher volume, right? People think that that's the low, and then it'll continue lower and lower and lower. And we should talk about this all the time. Usually these distributions occur in a 3 lower low, sometimes 4. Kind of systematic, I'm trying to think of the right word, phase, I guess is the right word. Like it's very systematic, these phases, where we get 3 lower lows, and then you'll find some kind of capitulating bottom that I call a footprint candle, where it really signifies the end of one campaign and the beginning of another, right? So no real high volume here, distribution occurs, then we see our highest volume pretty much, I would say, ever, if not in a really long time, back here on May 15th, right? This hammer candle. And now this signifies, hey, Distribution's over, accumulation's likely begun. Let's start watching for the structure to occur, right, where we can start to look for, we really don't want to be capturing it here via options, right? We want to see the automatic reaction play out, secondary test again, or sometimes it doesn't even give you a secondary test, but really we want to look for a spring underneath this candle here, which is our anomaly candle or our footprint candle, and then look for a pop to reclaim back above, right, whatever this low would be at our sell climax. And then you can wait for some kind of test, right, which would be here or here. And then we wait for a much larger move higher as the LPS, which would occur off of somewhere near the automatic reaction, or in this case, we can use a gap. But looking at this chart, you guys obviously can see here, I think I took the position on the 30th or the 31st. I actually took 5 contracts for August 15th, somewhere in these 2 days here. I didn't think it would undercut just yet, but it did undercut. I just held the contracts and I just kind of let them do their thing, right? I had them at 2.3. They came to a low of like 60 cents. Didn't do anything with those. And then as it ended up reclaiming back above, right? So on this day, August 8th, it really piqued my interest again because I started to think about this from a larger time frame, right? Like not only a weekly, but taking a look at it from a monthly. This just ended up being a large lower wick underneath that low. If you guys remember MU, right? MU, almost the same thing, where we had this 6 to 8 month base here, where we noted the accumulation was occurring. It swept underneath and had one of our higher volume bars with a sweep candle, right? Just a large lower wick that soaked and pulled right back up, not necessarily to our spot, but pretty damn close to that gap that we were looking at, right? So UNH was just kind of looking at this to see if we can get a recovery back above. Timing worked out really well too because we knew that Warren Buffett was going to be disclosing in his 13F filing what he had purchased in Q2. Pretty big deal because he has been primarily cash for a while now, right? He's been saving a lot of cash, and his last major buy was Oxy, which hasn't turned out so well. So a lot of people are waiting to see not only what his 13F filing was, but a few others. I know Druckenmiller's in this. Who else is in this? Not Warren Buffett. He is in this, but what's his name? Michael Burry. One other person, I can't remember the name, but yeah, once it reclaimed here, piqued my interest right away. It was on August 8th. The next day we opened above and then held right above our level. So I took this once again, right? I took this here on August 12th. Took a decent chunk of position. It wasn't anything super crazy. I think I took 11 or 12 contracts. Ended up ripping up towards the highs here. And then from here, it got a little bit hazy, right? These usually offer an opportunity if it can break above this progression gap. You get some kind of a test candle that will pull back down into this, like this. It'll rip, right? Or it'll do something like this, where it'll pull back down, retest the gap, right? So we were kind of using our gap as an area where we believe the test would occur. So I was looking for a pullback there and then a rip. Either way, right, 282 was my target here, and then from 282, I thought we can maybe get like another secondary test here, and then kind of a launch like this, right, kind of how I have drawn out. Guys, I'm not gonna lie, it kind of turned out how I wanted to. If you take a look here, it didn't get picture perfect, but off of the open on Thursday, August 14th, it did open here, go a little bit higher, and then pulled back. And if you guys take a look, it was pretty damn close from our level. So the bottom of that wick came within $1.25, so about 0.5%, right, from our 265.70 level. I did not take it, right? I don't know. Some part of me was thinking that there could have been a potential or a possibility that it would do this schematic here, where if we were up here, we would sell off if there wasn't any good news. Like Warren Buffett didn't in fact buy UNH. Maybe he bought Pepsi. Coca-Cola was an option. People were speculating UPS, right? And maybe it pulled back down here and then hit this gap fill at 261, and then that provided a move higher. So I was just staying patient. I only had the 2 contracts on the September 9th or 19th that I held after I trimmed into these highs here right before the close on Thursday. Just had 2 left on those, and then I still had the 5 contracts left over on the 280 calls for August 15th. So 1 day till expiration. My God, just looking back on it, I wish I would have taken like 20 or 30, maybe 50 contracts on that and just put some risk on the table, considering how cheap they were. The fact that I only had 5, I could have got a really good average. And dude, like those went crazy. They went 2K each. So if you bought 50, it would have been 100K, right? Off of, or with like maybe 3K of risk, maybe 5 at most. Would have been an absolutely insane trade. But nonetheless, it is what it is. Made a good amount of money on that. You guys saw I had a 14K day. That was spread through the September 19th 280 calls, which went from 500 apiece to about 20. I got screwed on the at the open. I tried to put an order in at the ask, but I was looking at the ask and it wasn't opening right away to what the price should have reflected as, right? They should have opened around 2,800, 2,900, but there was no orders in it. I didn't want to just hit sell market and then I get like a fill randomly at like 9 or something crazy and way below what it was worth. So I waited for a little bit. It opened at 2.6, pulled down to 2.3, and I closed somewhere in that range just because I wanted to get out. Unfortunately, they ended up popping a little bit higher to like 3,300, but nonetheless, right, I made about like, I don't know, like 4 or 5K off of those 2 contracts there, which was really nice. I got really lucky on the 5 contracts that I held. With my 2-3 average down to 60, I was down like 70% on them, 60% or something like that. Those ended up going to about $2,000 a piece. So you guys do the math, and then obviously I have shares as well that I was buying here, right? I bought at 265, and then I bought some more around like 257ish. So I plan on holding those for a long time, so I just have those in a different account, so those weren't reflecting in this account at all, what I showed you guys on Friday. I plan on holding those for a while, all the way back up to 580 plus, right? So that's going to be a big idea here. But this chart is just now showing what we want, right? These accumulations, yes, it's really nice to catch these on a one day till expiration or 3 months out, but a lot of people will take their eyes off of this now that it had that big move. This chart is just now starting, right? I kind of showed you guys already the accumulation schematic there. I'll post it up here again, right? What we're really looking for is just continued healthy trend, right? So I have it drawn out here with these little lines, and what we're really looking for is continued move up, whether it sells off right away, right, down into 282, that's fine. That would still be a higher low if it holds 282. But what we're really looking for is a slow, continued grind up into this spot here, right? We want it to push up to that 335 gap fill. At that 335 gap fill, I 100% expect some kind of seller. What we want to see is that seller become mitigated, right? We want to see sell pressure diminish and it pull back on lower volume, right? And hold a higher low, develop some kind of consolidation. Maybe it's just a 2, 3, 4 bar pullback that ends up being like a bull flag right into the EMAs. Whatever it may be, that's, in my opinion, the LPS, and we can look for an entry somewhere in this range here. If we miss it, it's fine. And what you'd look for is a harmonic breakout, so a high volume bar, right? So high volume, just like this one here, that pushes through resistance, and the resistance would be the sellers here at 335. It breaks through that, and then it pulls back on diminishing volume, right? Which we're looking for with a divergence, right? We're looking for a divergence back to 335. It holds this level here, which was a big resistance, right? This is a big spot. Sellers want to hold their progression, right? We talk about progression all the time. And then we can look for continued move up to 378. So that's really what I'm looking for. I'm staying patient with this. I have a good chunk of shares that I can just hold now without the the pressure of the Greeks behind me. I don't have to worry about Theta. I don't have to worry about Vega, IV, nothing like that. Simply a share kind of play here. And what I'm looking for before I take options again is that LPS SOS, right? Somewhere in these 2 ranges. And if you guys need like a visual representation, really good chart that we actually just recently traded, I'll go back really quickly, would be LRCX or MU, right? A really good example here. You guys remember this chart? I know it's in black, so I can kind of just like redo this really quickly. Just give me a second. You guys remember this, huh? We were looking for the accumulation to happen in this range. It gave a terminal shakeout underneath the range, very similar to what UNH just did, where it swept underneath the local low. This one was a much bigger accumulation as it happened for multiple days, weeks, months. But this whole range here, right, was an undercut and a terminal shakeout. or a spring, whatever you guys want to call it. And what you really waited for was a recovery back above this initial low, this consolidated range where the accumulation was initially starting. And once it recovered, even if you miss this, right? Very important, even if you miss this, it ripped. And what did it do right here? Hit it, flagged on low volume, right? Hit it again, flagged on low volume. And then you had a very, very high, I wouldn't even call this an engulfing bar, but very, very large volume bar that came right off of a gap fill, right? Very large volume bar. This kind of gave you a kind of, I don't know if it was like a sign, but because it didn't close right above, but there was a buyer that came in very heavy off of this large lower wick here, held relatively close to that level at the gap. Next day, rallied back above, closed above, and then it gave, you know, a really solid move all the way up to the top of this gap here, right, and or the swing high, if you want to call it, at 91.7, and then continued all the way up into the 106 gap, right? The other good example, right? What chart do you guys think I'm going to go to? MU. What did MU do? Let's take a look. Same exact thing here, right? Let me just, why does it doesn't let me double click that? It drives me insane. So, same exact thing. The cumulative range, we were all over this forever, right? It even shook me out because I wasn't expecting a terminal shakeout, but it is what it is. Terminal shakeout, let me make everything white again. There we go. Terminal shakeout underneath the cumulative range, swept under about 26%, reclaimed here at 83.94. Right? This could have been an entry. Boom. If you missed it, it gapped up. What did it do? It consolidated here against this lower gap here. So the progression gap, or the bottom of the progression gap, I should say, I'm sorry, 98.20. Consolidated here on low volume. Every seller was bought back up, maintained the gap that it created here from the gap up. SOS, LPS, rallied through the gap, filled the gap, and kept going. Pushed all the way up to our target of 127 before selling off. Retested the top of the creek here, and then it kept going again. And obviously it retested 127 twice. But that's a good example of what I'm expecting UNH to do right around here. So imprint that in your brains. This is what I'm looking for. 378 would be the target on this. And then, you know, obviously if we do break 378, probably a breakout above, some kind of reaccumulation would occur, and then obviously starting a trend back up over a period of time, of course, back up to like 480, 580 would be the two targets next. And I think it would take a couple earnings seasons to do that, right? I don't think it's going to do that during a cash session. It's going to require some gap up, some news, earnings, as I just said. But really important chart here to kind of add not only into your folders, just take mental pictures of this, of what they look like, how they feel. I mean, this name was at an all-time low with sentiment. A lot of people were trying to buy each new low, right? And we talk about this with the three lower lows, how they can feel. And they show signs of buying, but they keep going lower, and you got to wait for that footprint candle. Once you get the footprint candle, boom, it should automatically be on watch, and you should be watching for the structure to build out from a Wyckoff perspective, right? Wait for the sweep underneath the spring. Wait for a spring or a sweep underneath the footprint candle. If you don't get one, it's okay. You can wait for a breakout back above, wait for a test within a progression gap, or wait for a push, some kind of higher low / test off of a key support. If you miss that, wait for the SOS LPS here, right? Very, very simple. This chart is going to be a banger, right? I think this chart is going to be absolutely amazing. So keep it on watch. So that is going to be one of my primary focuses for probably the next year, guys, if I'm being completely honest. I don't want to miss this chart. Everything is there. Every variable is there. Big investors entering in, volumes there, schematics there, sentiments there, with people getting shaken out. People probably want to fade this now that it had a move after they've been stopped out. Everything's there, right? We just got to be patient for that SOS LPS. And that should be one of our primary focuses. Now let's jump into a couple other names. Palantir I've been talking about for a little bit. Been a little bit difficult, but I think we, at least I tweeted and I put out a local top. I haven't traded it just yet. We want to wait for the lower high. But let's take a look at that chart really quickly. All right, guys, same exact thing here. Palantir, it's not picture perfect distribution just yet, but it does look like a mean reversion is going to occur. I wanted to simply invert this, so this is Palantir inverted, because a lot of you guys are still looking at things from more of a bullish perspective. I think seeing bullish charts is a little bit easier. So just looking at this, right, if we take it from here, technically right around there, 171.81, what would be what I'm looking for, right? Kind of a footprint candle here post earnings, so you can view that as a footprint candle. It's at the top of the trend, or in this case, since it's inverse, the bottom of the trend, where we get higher volume after sideways movement for quite some time. It shouldn't say sideways. Obviously, this is moving up, or in this case down, but moving there in relatively slow grinding fashion besides this earnings gap, but moving there on low volume. You get a high volume bar. It should always be of interest here. Now what I'm really looking for is some kind of push up into this spot, which it's done, a flag, right, which is our lower high, breakout through the spot, right, which would be that 171 gap, a base of that gap, and then a rally to our level, right, which should be right around here, right, 158. There's actually a hidden gap. I shouldn't say hidden, but another gap here at 154. And that's what I'm targeting, 154-ish. So somewhere in these two zones here, essentially what I'm targeting, and this level is actually off. Let me adjust this really quick. I'm trying to do this off of opens rather than closes because this should be a bullish chart. But yeah, 155, 154, that's what I'm targeting. So if we invert this back, right, you guys can see rounding top formulating here. We're looking for a pullback down into the open, which is our gap, right? What do we expect? Some kind of lower high bounce off of that. Cool. What does it end up doing that? Remains to be seen, right? We should have our high marked right here at 190. I always put a little red marker here to kind of gauge risk off of. I know this is the top, aka resistance. Does it fall short of that? And if it does, right, let's say it pushes up to this little line here, end up taking a very simple trade where you can go here, risk up here, target down here, and ideally you can get a 2R on that trade. This would be a 4.4. Obviously it's a little bit different with options, but you guys kind of get the gist, right? That's a good trade there. But we want to see if it ends up putting in a lower high that just fizzles out bar by bar, leading into that 190 level. If it comes up short, we get some kind of bearish candle on the daily that signifies the top. That could be your entry, risk 190, right? But if we do miss this, let's say it gaps down, or let's just say we missed the lower high, you wait for a breach underneath the gap, right? As I have drawn here, we would look for a retest of 171.81, right? And then a failure right here, right? This would be another good entry here. Obviously, risk is a little bit higher now, right? You guys get the point, right? This is a good entry, but now if you want to risk the high, right, this becomes a much different chart. That's a 0.86 RR. Not something I would take with heavier size. Obviously, I think some risk on the table would be okay. And let's say, there's a gap here, which usually ends up happening to me. So let's say we gap down over the weekend, right? And this is our NWOG right around 177. I mean, you could take entry here, risk the NWOG, maybe go a little bit higher to the previous open, like right around there at like 179, right? You could then take an entry there that's close to a 2R trade. That's a little bit better, right? You actually have an objective stop loss, you have a good entry, and then you have a clear reward. So balance here is something that I'm definitely looking at. There's two parts to this, two-pronged, if you will, where I'm looking to see if we either get a lower high off of this 171 spot that fizzles out before 190. I don't know where that would be, to be honest, just yet, but that's what I'm looking for probably the best risk-to-reward entry with the highest size. If we end up breaking down underneath 171, another opportunity lies right around 171.81 on a rejection of that. And then we just have to identify risk. Is it going to be off of a gap fill? Is it going to be off of, is it going to be super tight with a daily close above 171.81? Is it going to be a certain percent over that? You guys will have to see what it ends up being. But this chart looks really good. Looks like top is honestly in, right? I mean, we've seen this before with Meta and a couple other names. The tape flip still has been unkind for the short side. But this name has been pretty ridiculous, right? So still watching this name for sure on the short side, right? If you guys want to size down on puts, I totally get it. Puts have not been kind, as I've said, but this chart does have opportunity if it can give a lower high. And then obviously, if it breaks down under 171, lower down size, maybe you can go a little bit shorter with your expiration, so contracts are a little bit cheaper. And then looking for a move down into, like I said, remember I knew this was going to be an issue. Technically it's here, the close. There we go. So 154.27 would be the full move that we're looking for. So good little chart here that I wanted to cover that is short side. We'll go over one other name that I do think that has some good opportunity behind it as well. It's still, you know, it's right around the UNH idea. I'll take a look at it really quickly. We'll see if it ends up giving a pullback because it did have a good move on Friday. But let's take a look at LLY. Okay, LLY, very simple. What is it again, guys? You guys should be able to identify this right off the bat. Earnings, gap down, super high volume, marks our potential footprint candle off of a nice downtrend here. So could this be the bottom? Yeah, absolutely. We need to wait for a higher low though, right? So we got a nice move up. It's been pretty much straight up for the past 5 days now, right? Like I said, could have had a sick Friday trade here, but what we're really looking for is this old gap down, the open from Thursday. I mean, technically Wednesday going into Thursday, the open, right, at 675, 70, or 66 to now act as support and become a higher low, right? So I'm looking for some kind of pullback here. If it can pull back, I like the opportunity to then go long for a move up into this 746.37. It should be right around 10% on the underlying, so 70 points or so is what I'm looking for. Don't know the expiration just yet, but this is an idea that I like alongside UNH, especially if IWM is going to start catching a bid, guys, and we start seeing a rotation. I think these names can definitely catch some wind here, and obviously names are beaten down. We're seeing tech potentially sell off. QQQ, if you guys take a look, potential for this to slip underneath 574.63. If it does, and we start seeing weakness in broader tech, we could see that rotation occur into some more defensive names, right? And healthcare is obviously one of those. So LLY. Obviously, with the UNH strength, could catch a bid. Just needs a little bit of a pullback here, and I do like some calls for the 750s. Don't know the expiration just yet. Obviously, this is a more expensive name, trading at like 600 plus. So dated contracts are going to be very expensive. So maybe September's 19th would be a good one. We'll have to see what they're priced at. Honestly, once we get to that level, if we do get the pullback, it's going to be on the whim on what expiration I end up taking. And I don't want to trade anything super expensive, but this is something I'm definitely keeping an eye on here. And then what else? There was, a couple other things. I mean, if you guys saw, I took IWM, a couple contracts at the close on Friday. Just looks good, right? If we are going to see a rotation, the weekly, one of the higher weekly closes we've seen in a little bit. But if we take a look at this here, I mean, the clear spot here from back in July where we had this initial high that we would not break out through. We finally broke out in November. We retested it and like middle November, and then we made a higher high, although it was a very small higher high, and then it ended up selling. Still, right? We had all the aspects we needed to kind of gauge that this was an important level with it being resistance. It retesting as support, it caught a bid, and then made a new high. Key level broke down, retested it again from below, and it acted as resistance from here, right? Pretty much end of December, middle of January, and then it ended up becoming resistance end of January, and then sold and made a new low, right? So very interesting spot where we finally got to push up into this. It acted as resistance here in July. We finally broke out through it, pulled back down, right? The weekly, as I said, slightly above, large upper wick, but if we take a look and see the full story, the daily showing a completely different story, right? Where we broke out, had a really strong bar that broke through, closed high. I wouldn't say it had high volume behind it, which is one little thing I'm worried about. But the thing that made me confident in it is the pullback into the gap that held that level had high volume, right? High volume hammer. Second day on Friday, as you guys can see, lower wick again, closed above, right? And this has decreased spread. It's technically an inside bar, and it's maintaining above the gap. So this looks pretty good. I was looking for a move back up here, all the way up into 631. Maybe a move up into 634 would be nice, but I definitely think that this can move back up towards, what is this? Wednesday's high, right around here. And that's really all I'm looking for on that. Just a good little swing there. And I started some BMNR as well. BMNR, this name's been super, super hot. Little consolidation here against this gap. It's 33.90. Slightly undercut it with a very, very small spread. Then once again, we broke out on an increasing volume, and then we're pulling back down into this gap here at 51.43 on decreasing volume, as you guys can see, right? So very Nice little setup that we have here. I don't use EMAs all the time. You guys should know that, but nice little pullback into the 921. And once again, just looking for a pop off of those lows back up into 71.81, hence the 70 call that I took. We'll see if it ends up gapping up or gapping down. Whatever ends up happening, if we do gap down a little bit closer to 51.43, I might add into these ones. Or close and roll to September 19th, since they are decently priced. They're not too crazy on this pullback, but we'll have to see what it looks like at the open on Monday. But yeah, that's pretty much all I got, guys. IWM, BMNR, pretty much the main longs, and LLY, and then obviously UNH is something that I'm aggressively pursuing long term. Just need to get more of a structural base for it at the SOS LPS. And then Palantir is the one short side trade that I am eyeballing. Chart looks really good for that rounding top. Looks to be getting a lower high. Just got to see where it ends up coming at. And then from there, do we break underneath that key 170 spot, or 171 actually? So a couple names on watch, guys. And like I said, the main ones, UNH, Palantir, LLY, and then, obviously if they look good, IWM, BMNR. Next week, or if they just end up running, those should be some decent profits on those. So that's going to be it, guys. Pretty much it for the weekly scan. We do have some data, I believe, this week as well. If we take a look for next week, right? We have building permits, FOMC minutes, existing home sales, and then we have Powell speaking on Friday. And that's really it. So Monday, as usual, no data. So it's just a day to review the tape, see how the daily candles close, just particular levels hold. If we gap up, do we gap down and hold levels, right? Whatever ends up happening on Monday is really just a sit back and speculate, or spectate is probably the better word, and see what ends up happening on Monday. And then starting to position off of that with current positions or newfound ones. So that's going to be it, guys. Hope everyone has a good Sunday, and I will see you guys on Monday.